So hi, welcome. My name is Carmela Troncoso. I'm a professor at computer science in EPFL. And today I'll talk a little bit about the things that we do in my lab, which mainly relate to the impact of technology on society and how we try to mitigate it, how we try to get the best of the technology without having the bad parts. I'm gonna try to speak slowly, but sometimes I get very excited about what I talk. If I speed up, feel free to open the mic or just say in the chat, please slow down. So the context of our work is the digital world, the digital society in which we live, in which a lot of the interactions that we have between us or with institutions are mediated by technology. Nowadays, you probably are familiar with all of most of these icons because you have used them the more now in the middle of this pandemic. We use online social networks to communicate with friends. We use different technologies to listen to music. We even nowadays for running, right? We don't know anymore kind of run on our own. We could run with our phones, record the route that we did, and then upload it to Strava to be able to discuss with our friends how well we did it today. Did we run faster, slower? Did we actually find a very cool route? And so forth. Even this has gotten home here. You maybe recognize Amazon Alexa, these voice assistants that nowadays we can talk to them and they can answer anything from what is the weather outside to give you a recipe for a very nice spaghetti bolognese, from if you have connected a lot of the devices at home, tell you whether the chicken is ready or not. And each one of these different technologies, if we think about them independently, I mean, they are very cool, right? They solve things in our life. Like, for instance, the way that we can communicate remotely is very nice. I'm actually Spanish, and I really like the fact that I have WhatsApp, which I can use to communicate with my family. And nowadays is the only way I can see my nephew grow up. And the problem is that when they are individual, it's okay. But if we see them as all together, they may actually start having a lot of information about us. And with a lot of information, they become a way of having influence in what we do and how we do it. In the same way as we had in The Lord of the Rings, Sauron being able to dominate the men and the hobbits and the elves and the dwarves with this the ring that would rule them all. And the thing is that once we put all of this information of all of these different services together, we have that we create a symmetry of power. They know a lot about us, and that means that they can use this information and the combination of this information to influence us. And when I started my career 10 years ago, actually saying this, I had to come up with examples and nobody would believe me. Nowadays, it is a bit easier to believe this thing, especially after the Cambridge Analytica Facebook scandal. Does any of you know what this scandal is about and would like to tell everyone what it is about? You can open your mic. No one? That Cambridge Analytica does not sound familiar to you? So Cambridge Analytica was a company that used this thing that they're called Facebook apps, in which you can program different applications inside Facebook to interact with Facebook users. And they built an application in which besides doing some kind of thing that users would like, they could collect this seemingly very naive data, such as where the users were and what kind of posts would they like. And this information that, again, individually seemed very very not dangerous, when you put it all together, what they did is they used it to train models that would tell them what people would care about, depending on what kind of things you were liking, if you were liking the same thing as other people. And then they would record what was your local preference, where you were located. And with this, they would serve advertisements that were very targeted to your likings. And the problem of this is that these were political advertisements. So if given your likes, they could discover that you were very worried, for instance, about religious issues, then they maybe gave you political ads about abortion, about one party permitting or not permitting abortion. If they could discover that actually your likes were more into the techno business sector and you were very into that, then maybe the ads were about taxes policy and how some parties would not tax companies so high. And by doing this, they actually, it's believed that they had much influence on the voting intentions of many citizens in the United States. And this was in the election of 2016. And we know what happened. And for 4 years, there was a president that for many, maybe it was not the ideal president, that created a lot of changes in that country and in the world just by using some data that was collected from the network. So we have that when we create technologies and infrastructure, these technologies and infrastructure may become one of these rings that may have more influence than what we liked. And destroying this kind of rings takes time. We go back to the Lord of the Rings. It took some time to actually mount the fellowship. To find those people, you had to find people from different kinds, hobbits and men and magicians and dwarves and elves, and put them all together and put the knowledge together so that they would be able to destroy the ring. Even once they were together, it took them 3 movies, 2 hours per movie to get to destroy the ring, 2 hours and a half, to be fair. So in the technological world, this is the same. Every time we want to build a defense against one of these systems, or we want to build a new system, this takes a lot of time and requires people with very particular expertise or a combination of people with very particular expertise. So what my lab aims at doing is to try to produce this in a more systematic manner so that we can use it in more than one situation to protect society from this dark side that technology may have. And we do this by building technology. One of the technologies that you may already know about is Swiss COVID, which my lab designed in collaboration with other researchers. And Swiss COVID is the Swiss application for contact tracing. And why we started building this application was that at some point, especially after the first wave, contact tracing was overwhelmed. For those of you that don't know what contact tracing is, it is the means that we have traditionally to combat epidemics, not only the COVID-19 one, but also others like other kind of very contagious diseases, such like AIDS or Ebola. And what it consists on is whenever you have someone that has tested positive for the disease, that is very contagious, you ask them who have been close contacts and therefore could have been infected. And once you identify those contacts, they would be called by the phone and they would be told that they were at risk of being infected and they needed to take precautions. The intention being that they stop going around, they stop meeting other people so we can stop the infection so that it doesn't grow in the way that we have infections nowadays. And the problem with COVID is that the volume of cases that we have means that this manual way of doing it, having interviews with the positive cases, learn who are the people that were contacted, and then calling them on the phone does not scale anymore. The contact tracing, manual contact tracing with humans is just collapsed, it's overwhelmed. So the idea was, can we use technology in a way to help us complement this service with something that allows us to go beyond beyond when the manual contact tracing cannot work anymore. And the idea was that it would be good to use phones because this is a sensor that everybody carries around, so that it would be easy to have a very fast deployment. And here, what we want to do is to be able to notify people that they have been in contact with someone. And something that technology allows us to do that the manual process does not allow us to do is we can notify even without knowing these identities. We don't need to find out who are those people to identify them. We can build, and I'll explain this in a minute, how we do this without even knowing who they are, where they are, or who they were in contact with. And what we wanted to do is to do this in a timely way. That means that it has to be fast. It is very important that the notifications get to people as fast as possible so that they stop spreading the disease. Efficient, that means needing less manual labor so that we can really scale, and scalable so that even when we are in the heat of the wave with the 10,000 cases or more that we had in October, we still have some infrastructure that help us break infection chains. And of course, while I was doing that, you were thinking, but come on, like we cannot have technology that will collect all of this information about who are the contacts of people, what are the contacts, and I have all of this on a database, because you just have told us that we don't want to have anything that can resemble this kind of ring. And that information is very powerful. So one of the goals that we had when we designed this system is to ensure that that kind of data would not be there, so that we could protect people from misuse, people from any agency, government, from taking this data and using it for something else, like surveillance or like manipulation, to take some actions on particular communities. We wanted this to not exist, so that there is only one purpose that the system can fulfill, which is the one of notifying people. And in particular, the information that we know it is very prone to misuse and is very useful is, well, users' identity, who they are, what are their locations, and this is because locations reveal a lot about your personality and who you are. So what religious buildings you visit, how often you visit them, what kind of social activities you do, and also behavior in terms of the social graph. Which people do you meet? How often do you meet them? How long do you spend with them when you meet them? All of these things reveal a lot of information about people and could be used. So we wanted to build a system that avoided that. And of course, we also wanted to build a system in which if you receive a notification, we can assure you that this is true notification, meaning that you were actually close by a person that was positive for COVID, and a system that is difficult to shut down, so that adversaries could not just make it unavailable, because if we cannot make the system work, why we would ask millions and millions of people to have this kind of technology. So in a nutshell, we wanted to be able to solve a problem, the growth of the pandemic, with technology, but without introducing new problems just because we have put a technology in place. And this is the design that we proposed. For those of you that don't know how the app works, when you install the app on the phone, the app generates a secret key. And from this key, it derives random nodes. And random codes mean that if you look at the code, you cannot know from which key it comes from. And if you look at two codes, you cannot know if they come from the same key or they come from different keys. So these codes in themselves, they cannot be used to track people or identify them. And the app keeps changing the code every now and then. So once your app can generate these codes, it goes broadcasting them all the time. And when you walk around, if somebody that has the app is close to you, they will listen to these random codes They would store it in the phone together with some information that speaks about the power of the signal that they have listened. And you can think about the power of the signal similar to the volume of the voice. When I'm very close, you hear me very loud. If I move far away, then you hear me less and less loud. So power for signals is the same. When a user is too far, then they will not listen to these random codes and they will not have them on their phone. When one of the users has the bad luck of actually having COVID and they are confirmed positive, their doctor would ask them whether they have the Swiss COVID app. And if it is the case, they give them a code that allows them to notify others that they have been close by and therefore are at risk. And the codes that that the device of this person uploads are the codes that this person has been broadcasting. And this actually is the key decision that allows this protocol to be very protective, because these codes do not depend on the identity of the person. I said they only depend on the secret key that the phone generates at random. They do not depend on the location of the person, where did they go and when did they go, because the codes are generated on a predefined schedule. They change, I believe, every 15, 20 minutes, depending on the implementation. So they don't say anything about where you were. And they also don't say anything information about others, because you upload the codes that you have produced. Everybody produces the same amount of codes, regardless of how many people they have met, who they were, how often they met it, etc. And then once we have here in the server the codes of the positive people, the rest of the apps download these codes, and then they check in their internal list that they have not sent anywhere if they have seen it. If they have seen the codes, they take all of the codes that they have seen, and then they make a computation with all of these codes together and this power information I said about how far they were. And this computation says whether they were for long enough, which is about 15 minutes, close, which is about 1.5 meters, to people that were positive with COVID. If that is the case, and then they are deemed in risk of infection, the app will show a notification that asks them to call an info line to take new steps. So the information that we have in the system, the only information that leaves the phone are these codes that are actually only useful if you download them and have seen the codes before. Otherwise, they are just random numbers that are useful for nothing. And this is how we protect the system from abuse. Another very important property for us was to give users power to shut down the system. One thing that was important is sometimes when systems come in and they come in for a purpose, and then the purpose goes away, but the system is still there, and then maybe they can be reported for something else. In this system, in Swiss COVID, even if the government would leave the server running and would say the app is going to be still there, because it is the users who have the app on, and it is the users the ones that upload data to the server, the moment that they stop doing this, the system dies by itself. So the power resides on the users and not on the service provider. And the system has such nice properties that it was adopted by Google and Apple, who have a version of this protocol on every phone right now on the world. And this is the basis of applications for contact tracing in dozens of countries. And this protocol, at the end of the day, we very soon discovered that when you are in academia, and this is what we write, what we make research on, we believe this solves the problem, but this is actually a very small piece in the puzzle. The protocol has to be integrated on an app that has to live on a mobile system, has to be connected to the health system, which in the case of Switzerland, because the health is cantonal, it is very decentralized, so this was very complicated, and it has to comply with the law, and also we need to make sure that the system is ethical and the societal impact is minimal so that users would adopt it. And this is why getting this project to work took more than 30 researchers from more than 10 countries with very varied expertise from systems, a lot of people know in crypto, privacy, but we also had from other disciplines like ethicists and lawyers that would help us ensure that what we built actually was compliant with what society would expect, and epidemiologists that always made sure that we are actually solving the problem of COVID-19 and we're just not building technology for the sake of building it. And this first version also we discovered very soon that was not the end of it. There were some changes that didn't come from our own will. Some changes came because when Google and Apple integrated our protocol in their libraries, they also put different constraints that we had not thought of in the beginning. And there were also some operational changes on the system that when we integrated it in the bigger health system, we had to change in order to make sure that Swiss COVID gives the privacy properties that we promised from the beginning. So during the last 3 months, since July, there was the first version of this. By now, I think it's 4 months already. We designed again and again new mechanisms to make sure that, for instance, uploading keys does not reveal information. If you think about the system I just explained, the only people that upload keys to the server are kids that are diagnosed positive. So if somebody would see this upload, they would actually be very visible as person that have COVID. We designed mechanisms to make sure that also other phones at random upload information to the server so that this upload cannot directly be associated to the fact that you're positive. We also designed other systems to be able to retrieve configuration files without affecting privacy properties, also to count active users. When you're deploying a system, you really need to know how many people are using it in order to be able to assess whether it is working or not. And we didn't trust downloads, because once you download apps, you can have it off on your phone or you can have uninstalled it. So we developed a way of counting how many apps are every day working in Switzerland without knowing which are the apps, who are the users. We just get the bulk number. We also nowadays, if you have the app, you will know that a month ago, we added another tab that provides information about the pandemic. And we made sure that also that information, how that information is brought to the app, would never interact with the privacy properties of the system. And right now, the app has 1.88 million active users in Switzerland. That's 22% of the Swiss population. In October, when we had the big hit of the wave, there were more than 15,000 users that uploaded their keys. That's about 50% of the positive in Switzerland. And so far, we have evidence that we collected through surveys on the field that the app is helping breaking chains of infection. We have by now probably around 300 positive cases that report the app as a reason for having gone for a test. And in these cases, we see that the app actually notifies users from half a day to a day faster than the manual notification, the one of calling through the phone. And this is very important because every hour that people are not in the street, that are not having interactions with others, are hours in which we reduce the possibility of infection, reducing the growth of the pandemic. And in Zurich, where we had a more extensive study, and also where there are more apps installed, there is a big concentration of people that have the app. We see that for each code, that means for each person that uploaded their information, there were 22 contacts that called the info line, and 5 of them were deemed at risk and asked to go into quarantine. And then for the people that have been tested with the app, 1 in 10 are diagnosed positive, which may seem small, but that's actually the same number that you get when you do manual tracing, meaning that the digital version works pretty well. And this is a very nice feeling for me and the people of my lab. It's the first time that a truly privacy by design product, one that is not based on data, is developed at such a large scale. And here are all of the countries that right now have applications based on this protocol. And in particular, these 6 use the code base that we developed here in Switzerland, and also have the extra mechanisms that we introduced in the application to ensure that the privacy protection would go beyond what the protocol gives. And there were a lot of lessons, like when you move to the real world and you move to deployment, and not only to write things on a paper. And we learned that engineering privacy in a world where you have to deal with real phones, with real systems, and things change, is exhausting. We had to redesign many times, as I said, to make sure that we always provide the privacy properties that we want. And also that integration with other systems, and here the health system is very hard, but it is key if you want the system to succeed. And this is not over. We know that the pandemic is still here, and we are now providing another protocol to try to help, again, people protecting themselves from the pandemic and protecting others without having to give up their privacy and their data. If you are from Canton de Vaud, you would know that right before the lockdown, whenever you would go to a restaurant, you had to use this application, Social Pass, to register when you went to a restaurant. And this application was getting and collecting a lot of data, names and surname, address, phone, that was sent to a central database. We believed that this was not necessary, and we can build an application that has the same philosophy as Swiss COVID and get exactly the same effect. The new protocol is called the Crowd Notifier, and the first prototype of this app, you can go here if you want to look at it and play with it. And of course, you're always welcome to let us know your feedback. But that is hopefully what it is coming, where we can still protect people from the pandemic without the need of giving up all our rights. And Swiss COVID is one of the examples of the outcomes that come from my lab. But as I said, we built many protections. In particular, we do 3 things. We create evaluation frameworks to check deployed technologies and see how much privacy invasion is in them, how much information it's leaked to others. We do a lot of privacy engineering. Swiss COVID is an example, but we have worked on others. And we do a lot of work nowadays on privacy and machine learning, trying to understand the negative impact of machine learning in our lives. So Swiss COVID is one of the examples of end-to-end privacy services that we have built, but we build a lot of small building blocks that others can use. These are called privacy enhancing technologies. This is one of the courses I teach at EPFL, in which we teach people how to create these pets and then how to put them together, in which we call privacy by design and engineering methodologies, in order to build nice systems that have a lot of respect for the users. Swiss COVID was an example. Another thing that we did is we built a search engine, privacy preserving search engine, for the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. These are the people that do the investigations like the Panama Papers, the Luxembourg leaks, very recently the FinCEN files. So they have a lot of very sensitive information that a lot of people don't want them to have. And they run into a lot of danger when they interact digitally. So we build a system for them so that they can do their investigations without running into danger once they go into the digital world. We also build these evaluation frameworks in which we try to understand how technology works and to bring more transparency about how much information is around. An example is a big study of parental control apps. These are the applications that parents put on the phones of their children to try to protect them from dangers of the internet and other dangers. And we wanted to know how much information these applications learn about the kids and how much information they send to others or they store in a non-secure way. Summary is that they collect a lot of data and not always in such a secure way as one would expect, given that they have very sensitive data. And then, as I said, we also study the dark side of machine learning. We try to protect people from the inferences that one can do with machine learning. And we also try to understand whether machine learning sometimes is biased and what kind of damage can the machines do when we make decisions on them, and they may be biased because of how they are constructed, and try to find ways to mitigate this damage. And with this is all I wanted to say, and I would like to now open the floor for questions about EPFL, the studies, or any other question you may have where I want to help.